I know folks are still joining, but I'm going to get started on our introduction. Um, Mostly, I want to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us. This is the second meeting in our series, our meeting series, focusing tonight on coho salmon and wildlife habitat restoration efforts in the Atascadero Green Valley Watershed. Everything we do is a collaboration between our funders, our organizational partners, landowners and residents of the watershed, and our community. And we feel incredibly lucky to be able to work in this place that we live and love being. This series was funded by grants from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, and Snowmobile Water. So tonight, in addition to Goldridge staff, which you will have several speaking, we are going to have folks from Snowmobile Water discussing salmon and steelhead monitoring efforts, wildlife resilience, and forest health efforts, and ag and open spaces riparian easement program, as well as about invasive species that are in our watershed and some things you can do about that. We have a packed agenda, so we're asking that folks either put their questions or feedback into the chat as a placeholder. And we'll have questions, time for questions at the end, if you prefer to raise your hand and ask questions of the speakers. If there's something that you don't understand or is a barrier to you being able to appreciate the information that's being presented, please feel free to put that in the chat and we will try to make sure we get that on the presenter's radar as quickly as possible. And then also just to let you know that there's a recording, obviously, that we started on time, and that will be made available after this meeting, along with any links or information that the speakers would like to provide about their presentations. Excuse me. So I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about the Gold Ridge Resource Conservation District. We facilitate stewardship projects that address water quality, climate change, biodiversity, ecosystem health, water quantity, and quality on public and private lands by providing technical assistance, outreach, education, and project implementation. We are non-regulatory, confidential, and free, provide free assistance to our community. So this again is that same area that you just saw in pink. It's outlined here in pink. And these are the watersheds within our district. And we're going to be focusing on this green, light green area, which is the Atascadero Green Valley Watershed today. One thing to note, here's the zoom in on the Atascadero Green Valley Watershed. One thing to note is that the watershed runs from south to north, where it joins the Russian River. And these are the two main sub-watersheds, the Atascadero sub-watershed in the darker green, and the Green Valley and Purrington sub-watersheds in kind of that lighter yellow color. Excuse me. The Atascadero Green Valley watershed is in the traditional lands of the Great Rancheria and Southern Pomo people, and it is home to a wide variety of flora and fauna, including us. It's considered a vitally important anadromous salmonid stream, and you will hear all of these words. Erin is going to jump in and give you quite a lot of information about salmonids in the lower Russian River Basin. But the Green Valley watershed has been identified as critical for recovery of coho salmon by Department of Fish and Wildlife and the National Marine Fisheries Service for both trout and for steelhead. There's a whole variety of land uses in the watershed that include orchards and vineyards, as well as forests and grasslands, pasture, urban and rural residential development. And then we have portions of the city of Sebastopol, as well as the towns of Forestville and Grayton. And this was less, I think this will also be something that Erin dives into, but this was the last watershed that supported all 3-year classes of coho salmon and was used as one of the sources of the broodstock program that is helping to recover salmon in the Russian River watershed. So Goldridge RCD has worked on 2 different management planning efforts for the Green Valley watershed. We have one that was done in 2014, quite a while ago, that focused kind of on the upper portion of the Green Valley watershed, Green Valley and Purrington Creeks. And then we have the Atascadero Creek subwatershed chapter, which was just completed in 2021. And that focuses mostly on the subwatershed of Atascadero and the lower section of Green Valley Creek. And these watershed efforts include background information, habitat restoration priorities. They're available on our website, and we can send links to those as well in the follow-up email. So this is very, very busy, and I don't expect you to actually look at too much of the information, but this is an example of the prioritization that came out of these watershed planning efforts. And the area I want to focus on is down here at the bottom for this lower Green Valley section, because I'm going to be talking about some projects that came out of this watershed management planning effort, and that these both identified a whole variety of ways to enhance habitat and watershed function within the watershed, and then it also prioritized them as high, medium, or low priority. So out of that effort came this enhancing the floodplain connectivity and aquatic habitat in lower Atascadero and Green Valley stream channel area. And so this is a map of some of the projects that are all happening concurrently. And although they are identified as different sites, we really consider them to be iterative and building on each other. Um, so starting up at the on Atascadero Creek, we have several projects that are in the process of design and moving down towards the Green Valley Road crossing and the Atascadero Marsh. We have one design that is underway to address sediment accumulation in Lower Atascadero, as well as berm removal to reconnect floodplain habitat. And then as this meets in this confluence area between Green Valley and Atascadero, we have, excuse me, we have a off-channel habitat project that is fully designed and funded, and we plan to be implementing this coming summer in 2026, which builds on this Iron Horse project for off-channel habitat enhancement and reconnection that was just completed in 2025. And I'm going to dive into that project a little bit just because it's new and exciting and we have some good information about it. And then we also are working on a project to design methods to alleviate the flooding at Green Valley Road. So for the Iron Horse, this is our floodplain off-channel habitat floodplain reconnection project. And this is just a schematic of the plans. We worked with Iron Horse Vineyards. This is funded by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, excuse me, as well as National Marine Fisheries. Excuse me. And it addressed two major floodplain reconnection areas, as well as an additional side channel that comes in that we call the Western Tributary. So there's a number of floodplain connection and enhancement areas through here, as well as a wide variety of revegetation efforts. So I'm going to show you, walk you through kind of a virtual tour of the lower floodplain outlet, which I'm going to show you is right down here at the bottom of the project, the downstream end of the project. And so this is pre-project. And while it was under construction, and this is actually when the side channel that connected Green Valley Creek to the floodplain was starting to be built. And here it is once it's built, and the revegetation efforts are just starting to get underway. And this was last week, I think. It was basically underwater during that high flow event. And we're going to be offering several opportunities to come out and see this project, tours both through Iron Horse and through the RCD. And we're working on setting something up with our partner, the Atascadero Green Valley Watershed Council. So if this is something you'd like to come out and see in person, definitely let us know and we will connect you with one of those tours. So I think I didn't do too badly, actually. I didn't go over my time egregiously. I want to be thank very much Aaron Johnson from Sonoma Water. Excuse me, I will stop coughing at you. From Sonoma Water for coming to talk to us and teach us about the steelhead and coho monitoring going on in the Russian River watershed. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass that over to Aaron.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna start my share here. Oh, I think we can still see your screen there.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm sorry. Thank you.
yeah, no worries. Let's see if we share. share that, and then, okay. Well, thank you for the introduction. My name is Aaron Johnson, and I work with Sonoma Water, and I'm going to be trying to summarize some of the fisheries monitoring activities we do, both specific to the Green Valley Atascadero watershed, but also how some of those monitoring activities we do fit into the larger scope of some of the basin-wide monitoring that we're doing. All over the Russian River Basin. So I know it's already been said, but I'm going to say it again. A lot of the stuff that we do is also very much collaborative effort. So there are some other names uh, on this slide that should be recognized as folks that contribute heavily to the projects that I'm going to mention. Greg Horton is in parentheses there because he's planning to retire this year. So but he's still with us for the moment. And then, of course, we partner very closely with California Sea Grant, Mariska and Andrew on this monitoring as well as you know some of the funding that makes it all possible, which comes from California Department of Fish and Wildlife, NOAA Fisheries, and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So just wanted to mention those collaborative efforts. Oh, yes, and we're going to do questions in the text, it sounds like, or in the chat, and save those for later. But what I'm going to try to do with this is really try to speak to a wide level or a wide swath of folks' experience with fisheries stuff. So I'm going to start a little non-technical and then move slowly into more technical stuff with the hopes that I can catch everybody. So hopefully that works for everyone. If at the beginning it seems a little obvious, that's why I'm starting easy and trying to get to more technical. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about the monitoring that we're doing in the watershed and in Green Valley and Atascadero specifically. And then I want to share some monitoring results with you guys, especially from our last completed adult season of monitoring, which was kind of unique, and we'll see why. And then share a little bit of what's going on in the current monitoring season, which we're in adult season with all this rain. We've got adults coming up and spawning, so that's the season we're in right now. So I'll share a little bit of that current data with you, and then just a little plug for something that was also mentioned earlier, was that collaboration with landowners along the creek and how important it is for the monitoring that we do. So with that, we'll get started. Okay, so hopefully folks know this. Maybe some of you know this, maybe not all of you know this, but we have 3 ESA listed sunmotted species in the Russian River watershed: Coho, steelhead, and Chinook. Coho are listed as endangered, and Chinook and steelhead are listed as threatened in this watershed. I don't expect you to memorize any of these tricks to identifying the adult fish in the wild, but I will at some point make that link available to everybody so you can get on the same page with everybody about that. And if you do see live fish in the watershed, figure out what you're looking at. So 3 different listed species, and we study all of them with the monitoring that we're doing. The project that I'm specifically working on and that I'm going to talk most about today is called the Coastal Salmon Monitoring Program. And it involves monitoring at a couple of different spatial scales. And so I'm going to talk about both scales. And so when I'm presenting data later, you'll see that sometimes I'll be talking about individual watersheds. Sometimes I'm talking about the Russian River watershed as a whole. So that's just because it's got these multiple scales of monitoring that we're doing. So the first one I'm going to talk about is sort of what we call life cycle monitoring, where we kind of focus very closely in on in this case, four different watersheds in the basin. That would be Mill Creek uh, and Green Valley, which is one of the watersheds we focus on. Your neighbor to the west, Dutch Bill watershed, and then Willow Creek, which is one of the larger, furthest down towards the mouth of the Russian watersheds. And so we kind of get laser focused on these particular creeks as a way of assessing the health of the population. And these also correspond with their watersheds that are sort of significant for other reasons, other than the fact that we're looking at them very closely, and that they're very important to the Coho broodstock program, as well as I think it was mentioned earlier. And when we study these, we're trying to get a measure of fish coming in and fish going out in these watersheds. And the other level of sort of spatial scale the monitoring we do is more of a basin-wide. And when we're talking about Coho and we're talking about basin-wide, so sorry, this forgot to mention at the last one. Hopefully everybody's oriented to the map here. But yeah, this is sort of the lower half of the Russian River watershed, or sort of the lower third, but the sort of west side of the Russian River watershed. So hopefully everybody knows where we are. And then this map is the entire Russian River watershed. And in this case, we've got this the watershed divided up between the species that we find in there. And so when I'm talking about, as I go through the presentation, talking about basin-wide monitoring, what we're really talking about is not quite the entire basin, because we are focused on the portion of the basin that we consider to be coho habitat. Turns out all the habitat we consider in the coho section happens to be steelhead. So that's why if you see up there, there's a green section, which is coho and steelhead habitat. So when I talk about basin-wide sampling, that's really what we're talking about, is this sort of lower third, the coho portion of the watershed. And we get estimates of both red abundance and juvenile spatial structure in this basin-wide monitoring. I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go. So the important thing to remember is that with all this is that I'll talk about a few different kinds of monitoring that we do. And the reason we do these different kinds of monitoring is that we are doing different monitoring for studying different life stages. And in this case, we are doing just freshwater. We're only looking at freshwater fish here. So this is a picture of the salmon life cycle, sort of simplified picture of the salmon life cycle. And we're really only dealing with the stuff that's in river. We're not doing any ocean work, although at times you can kind of infer what's going on in the ocean from the number of fish that are returning from saltwater to fresh. And so, like I said, different life stages mean different monitoring strategies. So for adults, we do surveys, we do spawner surveys, and we do pit antenna monitoring. And PIT, it's just an acronym, means passive integrated transponder monitoring. So I'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's sort of a fancy way of saying it. A tag that can be extremely small, so because it doesn't have any power source associated with it, basically just a tiny little coil of wire. But it's activated when it comes into contact with the energy field from an antenna. So if anybody has their dog or cat chipped, it's basically the exact same technology. It doesn't do anything while it's in the animal, but if you get an antenna and place it over it, it spits out its number, and we can tell which fish that is. So spawner surveys and pit tags for looking at adults. And then on this diagram, they call them fry, but I would sort of broaden that category to include juvenile fish of any age prior to smolting. So these fry, they look a little small, but it could be anything up to fish that head out of the watershed, before they head out of the watershed as smolts. And we study those, we look at those with snorkel surveys. And then for fish that are smolting, for young fish that are leaving the watershed, and heading out to the ocean, we use downstream micro trapping to study those. So just a little overview of why we're doing the different monitoring methods that we're doing. So the first one I mentioned was spawner surveys for adults. This is, we'll have a couple technicians walking up the creek in waders. You might see them out in the watershed. Um, Walking up the creek in waders, we're counting live fish, we're counting carcasses, and we're counting reds, which are the nests that the salmon dig in the gravel of the watershed. And because the reds have a distinct shape, kind of a dugout portion upstream and then a pile of sorted gravel downstream, counting reds can be a way to sort of it's an indicator of how many adult fish are actually there. Because it's not always easy to catch actual fish in the watershed, but the reds, they stay behind, they leave them there. And it's, because they have a distinct shape based on species, you can potentially tell what species dug the red based on how it looks. And we do those surveys every 10 to 14 days through the winter season. So I'm going to share with you some of the results from those surveys. These are results from actually our last complete season, which was the 2024-2025 adult season. So just to walk you through this graph real quick, this is Coho only. And what you have along the bottom axis there are just generic dates from sort of when we usually start surveys in November all the way up until April when we finish our surveys. And so what you're looking at here, each one of these lines represents a year of data collection of counting Coho reds. And these are cumulative counts. So that's why the lines are only going up until they reach the plateau. So, and the two things to notice about this, well, let me say one more thing, is that really thick red line is are the Coho counts from last season, 24-25 spawning season. And so two things to notice here. One is that the red line there is considerably higher. What we got on this graph is about, we're going back to 2013-14 here, that winter. And so that's over 10 years of data collection. And as you can see, last year's Coho counts were quite a bit higher, more than double actually the previous largest counts of Coho. So we had a pretty amazing Coho count by all the metrics that we have. The other thing to notice, oh,
halfway
pardon?
through. Halfway.
Halfway. Oh man. Okay. I'm gonna have to speed up considerably. I apologize for that. Thank you for that reminder. The other thing to notice about this is that most of these lines are kind of getting steep right around between mid-December and mid-January, which is when we see kind of the peak of Coho in the watershed. And then, so these are the estimates we get for basin-wide monitoring of Coho reds. And as you can see, this is 10 years of monitoring, give or take. And the one all the way at the right there is last year's. So I can bring in the average ones. These lines are the average of all the estimates for that time. And you can see both the Coho and steelhead estimates last year were quite a bit higher than the average. So it was a good year. Coho was like more than double the average and quite a bit more than the previous highest year. Steelhead was a little bit higher than average, so but both of them looking pretty good. So now we're going to bring it back down to the watershed level, the life cycle monitoring level. And as you can see here, these are red counts from each of those four life cycle monitoring watersheds. And what you can see here is that again, going from 2013-14 all the way up to last year, what you can see here is that it was kind of a good year for most watersheds, like in particular Green Valley. It had one of the top two counts for Coho reds, but what really kind of blew everything out of the water was Coho counts in Willow Creek. which were considerably higher than the average, multiple times higher in this case. So um, these are the counts in Willow Creek. We actually divide Willow into a couple different reaches. And so we think of it as Willow 3 and Willow 4. Those are the ones that we survey. And Willow 3 had about 10 times the average of coho reds that they've had in the last 10 years, and Willow 4 had about 25 times the average. So, and then throughout the whole basin, about 42% of the reds we counted were in Willow, and about a third just in that upper Willow Creek reach, Willow 4. So, you might get the impression from that that really the returns to Willow Creek are kind of driving these high estimates, which is the impression we got too. But there's other evidence we have that maybe says that it was not quite so concentrated in there, and that it was a good year in other watersheds as well. The other way we monitor adults in the watershed is through, as I mentioned, pit antennas, where we put one of these little tiny tags into a fish, and then we put antennas at the mouths of creeks, and so we can tell when an individual fish crosses that antenna, the antenna records its tag number, so we're able to. So when we have a big pool of pit tag fish, for example, from the hatchery that get released in the watershed, we're able to detect those fish as they're coming back when they cross these antennas, and we're able to construct a coho adult estimate from those detections. And so you can see the story is a little bit different when we look at it from looking at pit tag detections. There was actually considerable pit tag fish that came back to Green Valley Creek. Also, Willow, though, is really quite high. So this tells a story that maybe that it wasn't just Willow Creek that was driving those high returns. So that was sort of the adult stuff, spawner stuff. Now we also look at fish through snorkel surveys. We look at juveniles, and for this, the metric is a little bit different. We're looking at numbers of juveniles, so we're snorkeling every other pool throughout a reach and counting the number of juvenile salmonids that we see in there. And it's not so much a population estimate, it's more to see what percentage of the habitat that we think the juvenile coho are using. So this graph here is, again, the last 10 years of counts. And as you can see, this is for Green Valley Creek. So it wasn't necessarily that high in Green Valley, but we did see a pretty good distribution of coho. It just wasn't quite as spread out as the increase from previous years wasn't quite as dramatic, because here we're talking about not so much numbers, but how much of the available habitat are they using. So this was Green Valley counts, but this is a metric that we call PAO, which stands for percent area occupied. So the reason this graph goes up to 1 is that you can sort of view those green bars as what percentage of the available habitat in the Russian River that's available and useful for coho are we finding coho juveniles in. And we construct that from a combined combining a couple different scales of occupancy, and the triangles there are reach occupancy, like given all the reaches we looked at, how many of them had coho in them, and then the squares are pool occupancy, given the reach was occupied, how many pools in it were occupied by coho. So you can see those green bars kind of as a percentage, how much of the available habitat was being used. And so as you can see for 2025, also very high, highest we've ever seen. Although not quite as dramatic as the adult numbers, but still looks like that coho are expanding into a lot of the habitats that maybe they aren't using in years when there's not so many of them. So yeah, we recorded the highest reach occupancy and almost the highest pool occupancy, and then those led to the highest percent area occupied that we have. And then there's downstream migrant trapping is the way we monitor the smolts. And I'll just go through this quickly because I know I'm running out of time. And this is only for 2024. We haven't calculated the 2025 stuff yet, but if we look at Green Valley specifically, it does kind of look like downstream migrant adults are sort of headed down, although, um, like I said, this doesn't have 2025 on it, although I don't think 2025 would necessarily be a dramatic increase for this because we're not really going to see the returns of the smolt coming out of the watershed until 2026 downstream migrant trapping because the coho they spend a little more time in the watershed. They don't come right out after they've been born in the watershed. They spend some time in freshwater before smolting. So we expect that the smolt counts from Green Valley will be considerably higher in 2026 based on the adult returns and 24, 25 and the juvenile numbers we got.
5 minutes, Aaron.
5 minutes, thank you. So this is now I'm going to talk about the current season because yes, it has rained and we are seeing adults. And so we are in full swing for spawner surveys right now. So we had a couple of sort of decent storms since early to mid-November. Sorry, I'll walk you through the graph. This is the blue line is precipitation, and the gray bars are how many successful trips we did out for spawner surveys. So you'll notice a pattern right away that when those blue lines start to spike, there's no successful trips because everything's too high and muddy and we can't see anything and it's not safe to go out, so we don't survey then. So those two sort of big storms in November were enough to get things started a little bit and connect up tributaries, but things haven't really got super interesting until more recently with some of these other big storms. Now we are actually starting to see some fish. So this next graph is that same cumulative red graph, but in this one I've added in this year that we're in right now data. That's the thick red line. So you can see it's starting to come up a little bit. We're at about, I don't know, 18, 19 reds at the moment. Obviously quite a bit lower than last year when we had the highest on record, but that's not too unexpected. And this is where we're seeing them. These are all the reds that we've seen in different watersheds throughout the basin. I've excluded Pena Creek here, though, because early on we saw tons of Chinook reds in there. And if you have it on the graph with these other things, everything's just tiny and you can't really see anything. So we did see a lot of Chinook reds in Pena, but for this smaller tributaries, lower part of the watershed, Chinook are a little bit less of something that folks are interested in because they don't show up usually in these smaller watersheds. They're usually in bigger stuff like the Main Stem or Dry Creek or Austin, places like that. So yeah, that was I realize, kind of rapid overview of what our monitoring is all about in the watershed. I did want to end just real quickly with a quick plug for landowner access. We did send out a mailing recently in 2025, and some of you may have seen this. So just wanted to, if you have gotten one of these, we'd love it if you'd send it back so we can continue to do the monitoring that we're doing. We mailed that out to about 2,500 landowners throughout the basin, and permission from landowners makes it possible for us to do the things that we do. So makes it possible for us to get this data and then pass it up the chain to folks that make the decisions about about things like where to focus restoration dollars and where to, how to operate the hatcheries and things like that. So we want to give them the best information we can. We can't do it without all of you. So large thank you to everybody out there who has contacted me. I think I've probably talked to many of you in the watershed because I'm the one who's always calling you every time we have to go out for a spawner survey. So, but I just want to say thanks for that. And we couldn't do the monitoring that we do without the support of all the folks. So we do really appreciate that. This is the one I'm going to end on. Just to show that there's more information out there. I don't expect you guys to obviously write this down or anything. These will all be available, I guess, in either the post meeting email or in the chat or something. But you can actually, if you have your phone handy, you can actually hit that QR code right now and take yourself to our Sonoma Water, our data share page where we share up-to-date information about the monitoring that we're doing. There's all kinds of really cool stuff you can look at there. Lots of descriptions of what we're doing and what we're seeing out there. So that's a great start for getting more information. And then these other links are just to places where we post the papers, the scientific papers that we write based on this data. And I think with that, that's all I have to say. Hopefully, I'm not way over time.
Did fabulously. Thank you so much, Erin. We've got a couple questions for you, but we'll come back to those at the end. And I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Rose, to talk about fire resiliency program update. So Erin, if you can stop sharing and so Rose can pop on. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna work on sharing my screen here and go into presentation mode. Does that look good? Presentation mode going?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. Thanks, Erin. It was good to learn about that stuff. I love learning about the salmon. I'm gonna switch us over to thinking about the forest a little bit more and wildfire resiliency. My name is Rose Antaki, and I'm a forestry project coordinator at the Goldridge RCD. So the three main topics that I'll touch on tonight will be technical assistance, community forestry support, and financial assistance. And these are all three things that Goldridge RCD can help connect landowners and land managers of forested land with these resources. Okay, so first, technical assistance. So yeah, one of the main things that the RCD does is offer technical assistance to landowners and land managers. And this means if you have a question about your forested land or wildfire resilience, how to manage your forest, you can reach out to us and we can offer, some educational resources, but sometimes we could also do a site visit. So if you're interested in having us come out to your property, we'll walk it together and talk about your resource needs or any concerns that you have. And getting to see things in person and talk about it there can be really helpful. And then after we do that site visit or connect with you over the phone or email, then we will connect you with the right resources. So that might be other experts, like a registered professional forester, if you're ready to kind of take that next step and create a forest management plan, or connecting you with educational resources like workshops and classes. And if you're interested in getting some technical assistance from us, you can reach out to me over email or fill out our intake survey to kind of get the process started. And we'll have that all, my email will be at the end of the presentation, and we'll send out the link to that intake survey in our follow-up email. And then the next thing I want to touch on is community forestry. So because Sonoma County has so many small parcels of privately owned property, and a lot of our forested land is in these privately owned parcels, it's really important for communities to work together in order to implement these practices that will improve the health of your forest and also improve the wildfire resiliency. And these community forestry groups usually encompass, kind of the idea of a large neighborhood, but it depends on your area. And sometimes you'll hear of community-based groups like watershed councils or fire safety councils. And then there are also folks that refer to themselves as a community forest. So it just kind of depends on the area. But if you're interested in getting started with your neighbors, we suggest that you form a Firewise community as your first step. And that's a program that another organization in Sonoma County called Fire Safe Sonoma can help you get started with. It's a really great introductory kind of first step to organizing. You get to know your neighbors, you figure out the geographical area and everyone who's in it and start working together. But it's also not too hard to get started. So you don't need to have all the skills ready or anything like that. It's just about getting to know each other and kind of taking those first steps. And then once you're organized as a community, you can start working on larger projects. So the RCD can provide support to new and existing groups. So if you don't have a group yet, we can help you connect with Fire Safe Sonoma. And we can also help facilitate a meeting or organize a workshop or a neighborhood meeting for you and your neighbors to kind of get that process started. And then for existing groups, we can help with developing projects and applying for funding. So these groups maybe are already organized, they're already doing their defensible space and things like that, but now they're ready to move to the next step of like a multi-parcel project that might have to do with managing the vegetation along the roadside or doing some treatments in the forest, like limbing and thinning, that are really going to like increase the health and the wildfire safety of the forest. And working together can be a really great way to do a larger project and have more of an impact. And yeah, so a few examples just to give you kind of a tangible thing to think about. We worked with the Furlong community, the Furlong Road neighborhood over the last 2 years, and they're kind of at this first step. So we heard from some of the landowners, they're interested in getting started. There's a lot of enthusiasm, but they weren't yet organized. And this was at the end of 2023. So we had an introductory meeting. That's the photo on the top, got a bunch of the neighbors together and gave presentations and got them, just introduced to these ideas. And then about a year later, we had a follow-up meeting where they were actually taking those next steps to become a Firewise community. And we were kind of deepening the levels of learning that they were doing around defensible space and other safety and things that they could improve around their homes. So that group is starting their process right now of becoming a Firewise community. And then we have other groups around Sonoma County who are really advanced and have been organizing for years, like the Coast Ridge Community Forest. And they are, super organized. They've been at it for a long time, and they've had a lot of success with getting grant funding to fund these bigger projects like roadside fuel removal. And so that's just a great example of folks that we can learn from and look up to as a group who's really getting a lot done. And it also shows how working together, you can make those bigger projects happen. Again, if you're interested in learning more about the community forestry aspect or getting your neighborhood organized, you can reach out to me and I can talk to you about where you're at and how to get started. And then the next thing that I want to touch on is financial assistance. So with a lot of these practices, ways that we're going to treat the forest to improve the health and make it safer for wildfires, they're not cheap to do. They're quite costly. And so it's really important to have financial assistance available to landowners and land managers. And there are two main types of financial assistance that the RCD can kind of steer you towards and help you apply for. So the first one is incentive and cost share programs. And these are better for individuals and usually smaller projects. And this is something where you'll do an activity on your land and then get reimbursed for a portion of the cost. And then there are grant programs, and these are usually better for groups and larger projects. And the funding from a grant program usually covers the majority of the cost. And for something like this, you might want to get in touch with the RCD and get us involved so we can actually help you with that application process, potentially with developing the projects and then implementing them, kind of every step along the way. And then for the last part of the presentation, I want to focus on a specific financial assistance program that's available right now and tell you all a little bit about that. So the North Bay Forest Improvement Program is a really great cost share program that has a round of applications opening in just a few days. And so with a cost share program, the landowner will get reimbursed a certain percentage of the cost of the activity. And so in this program, there are three different tiers. Basically, 60% is the regular reimbursement amount. 40% is optional if the landowner feels like they can afford to carry more of the cost. And then 80% is for folks who lived in disadvantaged communities or severely disadvantaged communities. And we can help you look up if where you live is in that part of the map, then you can have a higher reimbursement rate. And then all of these reimbursement percentages, they're based on something called a cap sheet rate. So there's already a sheet that has all of the kind of costs per acre for the treatments. and then you can figure out how much you would be reimbursed for that. And that's available on the website if you want to get in the weeds a little bit. And then for the eligibility of this program, it's for private, non-industrial landowners, and that is for Lake, Mendocino, Napa, and Sonoma counties. And this program is for properties between 5 and 5,000 acres of forested land. So the North Bay Forest Improvement Program can offer financial assistance for two different paths. So if you're at the beginning stages of managing your forested land and you don't yet have a forest management plan, you can apply for financial assistance to help fund that forest management plan. And that's a really important first step to take. You'll work with a registered professional forester, and they will help you, collect data about your forest, work together to put a lot of information together in this document, and then also talk about potential treatments. And with that guiding document, then you'll be ready to take the next step to on the ground projects and implementing these activities. And so the other pathway, once you're ready, is to apply for financial assistance for those on the ground projects. And these types of projects would include thinning, so like increasing the spacing between the trees, limbing, which would be taking those lower limbs off so there's more space between the ground and where the canopy begins. Brush management overall, reducing the brush in certain areas, and then things like pile burning. So that's a way that you would get rid of some of the biomass that's created with these treatments. And those are just some of the typical things that folks do. But again, on the website, there's a really comprehensive list of all of the activities that are covered. And so the next round of applications is actually opening on January 16th, but it's open for a whole month, all the way until February 13th. So if you're interested now, there's still time, and this would be a great time to reach out. Of course, you can email me and I'll get you in touch with the right people. But if you want to just reach out directly to Adriana, she would be the person who's going to help you along with the process. So I have her email listed there. And last slide, this is just to let you know that there's a ton of information about this program on the website, and the website actually just got updated and it's all fresh and easier to navigate now. So you can see your eligibility requirements, learn about the application process, see frequently asked questions. And then there's even an informational webinar that goes in. It's like about an hour long, goes into more detail, and you can watch the recording there. So lots of resources for you. And again, if you're interested in maybe thinking about applying for the program, you can also just reach out directly to me or Adriana and we can get you started. Okay,
Great.
that's it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Rose.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
problem.
it. I'm going to ask you to stop sharing so I can turn it over to Allison from Ag and Open Space District to talk about riparian easement program.
All right, I'll get my sharing going. Let's see. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share, and thank you to Goldridge for hosting. I'm Allison Schichtel. I'm the Senior Conservation Planner and here representing the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District. My goal this evening is just to mostly say hello, put a kind of a face to the name, and share a little bit about our organization and some of the work that we're doing now to expand our efforts to protect streamside riparian areas in the Atascadero Green Valley Watershed, but also elsewhere in Sonoma County. And Kimberly, thank you for the congratulations, Americano. It's open, go see it, it's beautiful. So for folks not familiar with Ag and Open Space, we are a community-created, taxpayer-funded special district in Sonoma County, and our mission is to protect the diverse agricultural, natural resource, scenic, open space lands of Sonoma County for future generations. Just to share a map of where we work. Since we were created in 1990, We've protected over 12% of the county. That adds up to more than 127,000 acres. And we work primarily through to conserve lands through the purchase of conservation easements. So those are permanent protections on lands that restrict types of development that can occur on properties and have enhanced protections for sensitive habitats. In some cases, we may be working on farms and ranches that have special provisions that require agricultural use. Each easement is kind of catered to the individual property and what conservation values are present, and working with the landowner to understand what their goals are and their vision for the property, and then what our interest is for conservation. So we work across all of Sonoma County. We work on both public and private lands. We've protected farms and ranches, scenic open spaces and greenbelts surrounding our communities, important habitat areas and places that are both really small in our communities and also really big for folks to be able to recreate and enjoy nature. And I think this map might actually be outdated. Yeah, it doesn't show the massive land block that is the Monorio Redwoods expansion property. So I need to update this, but that's an example of a bigger property with a lot of partners that we've most recently worked to protect. And so this evening, I wanted to share some newer work that Ag and Open Space is doing for our land conservation efforts. We are, in addition to kind of our long-standing program to protect entire properties through conservation, where we're looking, where a property, a landowner might own one or multiple parcels, will typically acquire an easement that covers that entire property. We're looking now to kind of test out and expand our toolkit to look at just conserving streamside riparian areas on agricultural properties. We recognize that conservation easements for some can be burdensome, and folks might not want to retire all of their development rights or want some flexibility in how they manage their land. And at the same time, Ag and Open Space and the landowner may have common goals related to the protection of streamside areas. And so we're looking at opportunities to kind of narrow our focus where we have placed priorities and a lot of value in the conservation of riparian or streamside areas. And looking to see if there's an appetite for that. Is there interest by landowners to pursue this kind of acquisition? And so we've negotiated a couple conservation easements so far in Sonoma County and have been successful. There are a couple properties along the Laguna where we were able to place protections within the floodplain of the Laguna. And so now we're looking out across Sonoma County to try to expand that type of conservation approach. So what we're doing, we still have funding from NRCS to purchase riparian easements in Sonoma County, and also have funding for the implementation of small-scale streamside restoration and enhancement projects. So that's where we are through this funding opportunity. We're restricted to acquiring easements on agricultural properties and in forested headwater areas, but it does cover the entire county. But wanted to share, certainly one of our priority areas for doing this work is within the Green Valley Atascadero watershed, given that there are a lot of agricultural properties and there are a lot of floodplain wetland areas along Atascadero Creek, and then also in the headwaters as well. So we're interested in pursuing this work for the protection of habitat, to support water quality and quantity associated with creeks and rivers. And then we're doing this work, Ag and Open Space being kind of the lead on the conservation acquisition arm of the project, but in partnership with Goldridge and Sonoma RCDs, who are helping with landowner outreach, helping us kind of craft some of the considerations for our easement design. and also who will be implementing restoration and enhancement projects on lands that we're pursuing for protection. And so just to kind of reiterate where we're at now, we're in early stages of the program, really trying to make contact with landowners who may be interested in starting a conversation with us to see if this might be a good fit. And so my goal today is to say hello, and if there are folks that own property in the watershed and would be interested in learning more about ag and open space, how land conservation works, and think that they might have a property that could be of interest for this program, would love to connect and initiate the conversation and see where it goes. I'll note that this work is being funded by NRCS right now, but it's a goal of Ag and Open Space to fund and pursue riparian easements with or without funding. So we don't have a firm timeline, but we do have an opportunity now to draw down some of the funds from this existing grant program. So I'll keep it pretty short. The best way to follow up, I put my contact information here, but Simon Apostle, our acquisition assistant, he is the one who answers the phone and responds to emails for all of our inquiries from landowners, and he's the best one equipped to to follow up and provide information. We also have a web page on our website that's dedicated to our riparian conservation program, and then the flyer that's kind of shown here on this slide, I'll share out through the follow-up email. We'll make sure that link is provided or an attachment is provided, and that's a good resource as well. I think that's all for me this evening. Would love to connect afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. I'm going to turn it over to Will Spangler on the Goldridge staff to do our last presentation, and then we will jump into questions.
And good evening, everybody. Just make sure I was muted there. I get to talk about invasive species in the watershed. So there are several, there's a number, but there's several we wanted to highlight. Those are the New Zealand mud snail, Japanese knotweed, and brooms. I'm Will Spangler. I'm a conservation project manager with the RCD, and I've worked on the restoration projects that Sarah mentioned at the beginning, and I've worked on invasive species management throughout my career. So I want to touch on these briefly. That's some Japanese knotweed in Purrington Creek and a tributary with a surveyor on the left there in that photo. So I'll start with the New Zealand mud snail. It's an invasive aquatic species. It's a little mollusk that comes like its namesake from New Zealand. And they can impact stream conditions by competing with native mollusks and other macroinvertebrates that are generally used as indicators for stream health. They're part of the food web and impact water quality. So the New Zealand mud snail, when it invades this community, can alter the way algae forms in the watershed and also directly impact fish health. And it's relevant to Green Valley and Atascadero because it is present within the watershed, but almost more significant, it's present within Lake Sonoma and the Warm Springs Fish Hatchery, which is where the broodstock where the broodstock program is housed that helps with recovery of coho salmon in the watershed. Aaron can speak to this as well, but so the presence in the hatchery means we don't want to spread snails that could be ingested by those fish and then spread when they're released. And so it's limited the spatial extent of that program. Those hatchery fish are only released where we see the mud snails out in the wild. And so what that means is there are now only smolts that are able to be released within Green Valley Creek. And so they're released later in the winter and in the spring. And so it's hampered to some degree, one of the tools for recovery. And the lessons here are, for one, it's important to clean and decontaminate our boots and equipment that we use when we go in the stream so we can stop the spread of the snail. But it also just means there's changes coming, and until we can document the extent of the mud snail in other rearing habitat upstream, there won't be the ability to release release so many coho fish into the watershed. Another invasive in the watershed is Japanese knotweed, and folks might be familiar with this if they've traveled in the Pacific Northwest or on the East Coast, where it's sort of like kudzu type weed. It's an A-rated noxious weed for the economic damage that it can cause. It's a shrub-like perennial that dies back in the winter. You can almost liken it to bamboo that likes creeks. And it's also, I should say, Lagunitas Creek, Marin County. It's established there as well. So it can impact the stream by displacing all the great native vegetation that we love Green Valley Creek and Atascadero Creek for. It can really exclude everything else. And with that, you lose a lot of habitat characteristics and shade of the stream. It does die back and go dormant in the winter. And reduces the insect population, all the food for fish, reduces the shade that keeps the water cool, reduces the leaf litter and the large wood that they rely on for habitat. And then not only that, it can damage infrastructure. So it's quite a nasty weed. It can degrade habitat for fish. It's also really difficult to treat. Pulling it or cutting it doesn't really do much because it regrows from underground root fragments. And so it's one of those that sort of requires a really targeted, focused effort. It's often treated with herbicides, with a concerted effort, by mapping systematically through the watershed. And because it's present along Purrington Creek and in Lower Green Valley Creek, and it's spreading rapidly, and all those great restoration projects we're talking about potentially would be at risk for this washing in. So those might be some early detection sites for us downstream. So you'll probably hear again from the RCD. We're hoping to do further outreach, to do that mapping, and maybe start a treatment program as well, working with the Ag Commissioner's Office and the weed management area and others. And it's something, the surveyors who are going out to look for fish are just happening to see this as well. There are also brooms in the watershed. You probably don't need more people to tell you about broom. I imagine many people are familiar from driving around. You may have it on your property. And just a reminder that being winter, it's a good time to pull it. They're less of a direct threat to the stream, but they do change the riparian vegetation community. They displace the native vegetation that has all those good habitat functions. And then to what Rose is speaking about, they can act as a ladder fuel and a fire risk. They can carry wildfire up into the canopy and help it to spread, which we don't want to see those hazards. So yeah, I guess it's the big thing. Again, trying not to spread seeds of this. And the RCD has a weed wrench just like that in this picture. If you want to borrow it to pull broom sprouts before they flower and seed, this is a great time of year to do it. So yeah, just to hit on that, do consider when you're moving in and out of the stream, you don't want to bring mud that might have New Zealand mud snails or weed seeds with it. So there's a whole decontamination protocol I don't need to get into, but it's as simple as scrubbing the mud off is a good start. And freezing things for the mud snail. But if you're just in your backyard creek, just try to not move that material to other parts of the creek. And if you do see the New Zealand mud snail, they're very small, but there's a slideshow contains some good imagery of them. We can share other resources. Please report that to the Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's really useful in our recovery work. And likewise, if you see Japanese knotweed, particularly beyond Purrington and Lower Green Valley Creek, if you see it elsewhere, we want to document that using iNaturalist is a great tool that everyone can use on their phone, and to the Ag Commissioner's Office, there's a contact there as well. And just want to make sure everyone's aware there's a brand new Sonoma County Weed Management Area split off from Marin Sonoma Combined Weed Management Area. Meets regularly. The webpage has great resources for the county. The weed management area will hopefully be taking on a lot of great projects, including working with these topics. So just a group to stay tuned with if you're interested in invasive plants. And then I also put a link to the Marin Knotweed Action Team in here because they're dealing with similar issues with Japanese knotweed. So you can kind of get a sense of the flavor of what that looks like down there.
Thank you, Will. I just want to put in a plug for how satisfying it is to pull broom out. So I would recommend if you're looking for a weekend activity to give that a try. I want to thank all of our speakers and jump into the questions. So I'm going to pop up. The first one is for you, Erin. And there's some questions about What attributed to the high counts last year? Like, why was it so fabulous?
That's a great question, and yeah, it's one that I've got kind of a canned answer for because we've all everybody asks every time I give a presentation indicating how good it was last year. Um, the 2 second answer is it's complicated. It's kind of like answering the question why, what are the reasons that the fish are doing poorly in the first place? There's a lot of factors that come into that combine to create that situation. And excuse me. Likewise, there's a lot of factors at play when we see what looks like a step in the right direction towards recovery as well. I'm sure y'all remember 2020, 2021. We had some pretty terrible drought years. So those were years that really hit the fish hard. But we have had a few years where conditions were also, since those bad drought years, where conditions were pretty good. And by good, I mean, um, for the most part, decent summertime flows when juvenile coho are rearing in these smaller watersheds. What we would see during 2020, 2021, when we see the severe droughts was, especially later on in the summer, lots of creeks drying up. And I'm sure folks, you're in this watershed and I'm sure you've seen things like this too, but creeks drying up, creeks becoming disconnected, temperature going up, dissolved oxygen going down. And so we've had a few years in a row now of fairly decent sort of physical conditions for the fish to rear in, where we don't necessarily have those long stretches of no rain. We get kind of these early rains. And like we had this year, we had the summer, we had a few hot days, but it really wasn't that bad. And then we got a few of those rains pretty early on. So those help, oxygenate the water. They help bring the temperature down. So certainly just sort of fortunate weather conditions, I think, is definitely a factor there. We've also had truncated fishing seasons as well. That likely does help a bit too. And then there's a lot of restoration happening in the basin. This sort of the long game answer is that it's totally possible that what we're seeing, or at least the improving numbers, are partially because of some of the restoration of habitat that's going all over the basin, including, I'm sure, in your watershed as well. So, yeah, it's a lot of things, but that's the best answer I can give. Those are the things that I think are probably creating that, or at least helping.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Daniel, for that question. And then we have a question from Woody asking about, as a former scuba diver, he's looking for a place that he could snorkel somewhere in the watershed. And this actually hits on several of our speakers' expertise, and where he could go in the watershed to see fish. Good, safe, responsible place to go snorkeling and check out critters, which hits on open space access and places where we can access creeks, as well as how to do that safely, both for you and for the watershed, and not spreading invasive species.
Yeah, I don't have a great suggestion for that, although I can't. We share all of our information, like I said, on our data share site. So if you wanted to look there to see where we've seen fish, that would be a place to start to see where you might see juveniles. But I can't really recommend. Most of the watershed is privately owned, so you have to we try to be very respectful of the relationships that we do have with private landowners along the creek. So I can't really recommend any specific spots. Occasionally, though, folks will come out and join our crews when they go out to walk the creek for a survey. That's something that we sort of unofficially condone, since you're kind of on your own safety wise. But that's something that we do for folks. So I guess, yeah, long-windedly saying that I don't have a great answer for that, but there's definitely fish out there, especially this year. So um,
So Woody, I would say that for if you're looking for opportunities to just look for fish, there's some bridge crossings and opportunities to look for spawning fish. But for getting into snorkel, you need access to both sides of the creek in order to do that legally. Regal Ranch does have portions of Atascadero right upstream of the confluence with Honeve that are publicly accessible. I would advise you to talk to regional park staff if that's something that you might be interested in trying to do. And there's other places within other watersheds, but not within Green Valley that I can think of that would be publicly accessible to be getting into the creek. But there are spots on Dutchbill Creek where you might be able to see coho, and there is access to the stream channel as well as Lower Willow Creek. So those are possibility of places, but again, I would coordinate with state parks and or regional parks depending on which spot you're going to. Does anybody else have anything to add about public locations where they would recommend for snorkeling opportunities? No? Okay. Well, if anybody comes up with one, we will definitely disseminate that as well. It is a really tricky thing. We want people to know about and care about the creeks, and it's very difficult to provide access to them to actually get in and enjoy them. There was a question also from Woody about future beaver habitat restoration. And Woody, you may have to clarify this, but my understanding is everything that the RCD does is voluntary and in collaboration with landowners. We have not been approached by anyone that I'm aware of that has been interested in trying to do pre-planning for beavers that haven't been found in the watershed at this point. But we are certainly engaging with folks on process-based restoration and beaver dam analog work, which is trying to mimic the work that beavers do. And there are a couple projects in the Atascadero Green Valley watershed where folks are looking at beaver dam analogs and designing those. My understanding is that I know that there are beaver in the Russian River watershed, but I don't think that any of them have been seen in Green Valley, although it seems like Green Valley Atascadero might be a very desirable spot where you would beaver. But I think that that's those introductions, unless they find their way here on their own, those introductions are a little ways off, and we have not started planning restoration for beaver habitat at this point. But I do think a lot of it exists. Do any other panelists have anything they want to add to that? Okay. There's some discussion in the chat between Kimberly and Rose about registered foresters, professional foresters, and Rose provided a list of those. So if that's something that you'd like to see, please check the chat. Rose was also saying that defensible space improvement and home hardening are important parts of wildfire resilience, excuse me. Specific recommendations differ from property to property. So again, working with an RPF would be a good first step. Kimberly, thank you for your work on Sheep House Creek, Erin. Call it to a specific area. Sheep House Creek is gorgeous. That's the last of our questions. If anyone wants to raise their hand and ask any additional questions, if you don't want to put it into the chat, please feel free. I don't see any hands. Jose, do you see any hands? No? Okay. Oh, wait, Kimberly, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Cedar. I just wonder, is there now available any kind of financial help for home hardening or defensible space? Because when I looked into it a long time ago, it was just no group really was going to provide any assistance with actual home hardening. They didn't want to touch the house or anything like that. Has that changed?
Rose?
Let's see. So there are some defensible space projects, but they kind of pop up here and there. We just finished one up that was assisting in the communities of Occidental, Monterey, Meeker, and Forestville. So that was specifically on the defensible space. Now, home hardening, I would say I've seen less projects that provide funding on that, but that's also because that's not our specialty at the RCD. But talking to Fire Safe Sonoma about that, they focus a lot more on home hardening. So I think reaching out at Fire Safe Sonoma would be a good idea. And then also checking into, there are a few programs at Permit Sonoma that are kind of trying to address this, but I think they might have had a pause of funding and now they're starting up again. So you'd have to check in on how they're doing on that. But yeah, definitely talking to Fire Safe Sonoma. They're a great resource on home hardening.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Last fall call for questions, and I'm just going to let you know that we do have a survey, a participant survey that will be circulating after this in our follow-up email, and Jose also just put that into the chat. So if folks would let us know about what sort of interest and topics that you have for future workshop series and give us feedback on this one, we would very much appreciate it. I don't see any other hands. Last call for questions. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys all for spending this lovely Monday evening with us. We have one more workshop, which is on the 28th of this month, where we'll be talking about hydrology and restoration efforts within the Green Valley Watershed, specifically focused on hydrology and hydrologic function. And we will look forward to seeing folks who are interested there. And if you've come up with questions tomorrow morning in the shower, as I always do, it's my favorite thinking place, feel free. You're welcome to send them to me. I can circulate them to speakers if there's not something that I can answer on my own. So this will not be your last chance. But thank you so much. It was wonderful to see your faces.